They thought they could wreck people's cars and walk away like nothing happened. They thought having the numbers made them untouchable. But what they didn't know was who they were messing with. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. And drop your city in the comments. We want to know where you're watching from. The desert stretched out forever in every direction. A brutal, sunburnt sea of sand and jagged rock. One lonely highway cut through it all, a razor-straight line of asphalt shimmering in the heat like a dream you couldn't touch. Out on the horizon, a mirage danced, water, maybe, or just the desert playing tricks again. Right off that highway sat a diner. Old. Fading. Forgotten. Its neon sign barely clinging to life, letters half covered in grime, Betty's Roadside Grill. It wasn't much to look at, but in that kind of heat, even a rundown diner becomes a kind of sanctuary. Greasy burgers, bad coffee, and cold air conditioning could feel like heaven. The parking lot was mostly empty. A beat-up station wagon, a couple idling semis. But one truck stood out. A black Ford F-650. Massive. Shiny. Quietly dangerous. The kind of truck that didn't ask for respect, it took it. Reinforced bumpers, armored doors, tires that looked like they could roll right over a Prius and not even slow down. It looked like it had been through things. And survived them all. Inside the diner, time moved slower. The air smelled like fried food and forgotten cigarettes. Vinyl booths cracked at the seams. Ceiling fan creaking. Jukebox occasionally hiccuping out some old country tune. And in the back corner booth, a man sat with his back to the wall. No drama. No spotlight. Just quiet authority. He didn't need to announce who he was. His size, his calm, the way he cut his steak like he had all the time in the world. That was enough. Chuck Norris. Not looking for trouble. Just a steak and some peace. He'd been driving these roads for years. And today was just another page in that story. But out here, peace never lasts. The first hint of trouble was a sound. Low. Mechanical. Feral. It started like a whisper under the hum of truck engines. But it grew. The sound of motorcycles. A pack of them. They came fast. Roaring out of the horizon like predators. Through the window, 6 bikes emerged, dark silhouettes in the dust. They slowed as they approached. Leader in leather, skull emblem on his vest, raised a hand. They circled the lot like vultures sizing up the kill. Inside the diner, everything froze. Truckers glanced at each other. Betty, the redhead waitress, paused mid-pour. The bikers didn't come for a burger. They came for something else. And they were about to find out. They chose the wrong place. One of the bikers, lean, wiry, with a scar carved down his cheek, dismounted and walked toward the black Ford F-650, whistling low as he moved. He dragged his fingers along the side of the truck, leaving a streak in the dust. Nice truck, he muttered, quiet, but laced with just enough venom to suggest one thing. Ownership was about to change hands. Behind him, another biker, taller, bulkier, the kind of man who looked like he could walk through a brick wall, grinned wide and swung a heavy chain over his shoulder. His boots crunched across the gravel as he paced slowly around the truck, eyeing the reinforced build. Rich boy must think he owns the road, he laughed, voice soaked in mockery. Leaning casually against his bike, the leader of the group, the one in the skull-emblazoned vest, pulled out a cigarette. He lit it with slow, theatrical ease, exhaling smoke as he watched his men like a king amused by his court jesters. Inside the diner, Betty set the coffee pot down with hands that weren't quite steady. "Oh, hell," she whispered, eyes fixed on the window. "This ain't good." The truckers inside, men who'd seen things in their time, exchanged silent glances, but no one moved. Nobody wanted to play hero when wildfire was licking at the door. Trouble like that? You didn't need to touch it to get burned. Just being too close could do the job. At his booth, Chuck Norris didn't flinch. didn't look up. He reached calmly for his fork, speared another piece of steak, and chewed like nothing was happening. Outside, things escalated. The sharp screech of metal against metal tore through the stillness. One of the bikers dragged a knife along the truck's paint, carving a long jagged scar into the side. Another let his chain slam down across the hood with a sickening clang. A third crouched down and jammed a switchblade into the thick rubber of the front tire. Air hissed out violently. Inside, someone gasped. Another muttered a quiet curse. Chuck paused mid-bite. For a moment, time stopped. Then, without saying a word, he set down his fork and knife. He reached for a napkin, wiped his mouth with slow, deliberate care, and stood. The sound of him rising wasn't loud, but everyone felt it. He pushed back from the table. The leather of his jacket creaked softly, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Every conversation died. All eyes turned to him. Outside, the bikers kept laughing, still vandalizing, still clueless. Chuck adjusted his belt, rolled his shoulders once, and started walking toward the exit. The storm had just arrived. When the door opened, the wooden frame groaned like a warning shot. The soft clinking of cutlery stopped. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its voice, leaving only the faint echo of a country ballad as the soundtrack to what came next. Chuck stepped out into the blazing sun. The heat wrapped around him like an old friend. But he didn't flinch. Didn't slow. Each step across the diner's porch was deliberate. Heavy. Measured. He paused at the top step, eyes sweeping over the scene like a lion eyeing a pack of jackals. The bikers were still caught up in their own world. The man with the knife was admiring his work, smiling at the deflated tire. The brute with the chain shattered the side mirror with another swing. The leader puffed on his cigarette like a man with no reason to worry. Chuck's eyes moved across each of them, calm, calculating, unimpressed. 6 on 1? Didn't matter. Chuck had never been a numbers guy. He believed in the quality of the man, not the quantity. His boots crunched against the gravel as he stepped down into the lot. That soft crunch cut through the noise like a blade, carried not by volume, but by presence. The biker with the scar noticed him first. He turned slightly, smirking. But there was something else in his eyes now. A flicker of uncertainty. He elbowed the man beside him, the one with the chain. "Well, look who finally came out to say hello," he sneered. The rest turned. And when they saw who was standing there, their grins widened. Chuck didn't speak. He didn't need to. The leader, still leaning back with that cigarette in hand, exhaled slowly. "That your truck, old man?" he asked, amusement thick in his voice. Chuck just stared. The leader chuckled. "Damn shame. Looks expensive." Still, silence. The man with the knife spun it between his fingers, smirking. "What's wrong, cowboy? Cat got your tongue?" No answer. The leader took one last drag, then flicked the cigarette to the ground, sparks trailing as it hit the gravel. He pushed off his bike, stretching dramatically as he stepped forward, completely unaware of the fact that every second of silence was one step closer to regret. His muscles rippled under the vest. Big. Built. Intimidating. But Chuck had seen plenty of big guys fall fast. Size doesn't win fights. Skill does. "You gonna do something about it?" the leader taunted, closing the distance to just a few feet. Chuck exhaled through his nose, low, steady, unmoved. Then he spoke. "You made a mistake." The leader grinned, unbothered. "Oh yeah? And what's that?" Chuck tilted his head just slightly. "You picked the wrong truck." The smirk stayed, but something in the leader's eyes flickered. Chuck's gaze didn't waver. "And the wrong man." That landed. The confidence on the leader's face cracked, just a sliver, barely visible. But it was there. His jaw tightened. His pupils shifted. The biker with the knife stepped up. "You talk big for a guy standing alone," he said. "There's 6 of us. You really think you can take all of us?" Chuck didn't answer. The leader chuckled and half-turned toward his crew. "I think we got ourselves a real tough guy," he mocked. "Thinks he's in some kind of action movie." Laughter rippled through the group. The man with the chain started swinging it lazily in circles, metal links clinking like a rattlesnake warming up to strike. The leader turned back to Chuck. "I'll give you one shot, old man," he said. "Walk away. Leave the truck. Go back inside like none of this happened." Chuck looked over his shoulder at the wreckage. Slashed tires, shattered mirrors, deep gouges in the paint. Then back at the man in front of him. "No." The leader sighed and shook his head. "Suit yourself." The man with the knife lunged. Worst mistake of his life. Chuck moved faster than thought. His hand snapped forward, catching the biker's wrist midair. There was no hesitation. No build-up. Just cold, precise violence. Crack. The arm twisted in a direction it was never meant to go. The knife hit the gravel. The biker dropped to his knees, howling in agony, cradling what was now a useless limb. The laughter stopped. Silence swept through the lot like a shockwave. Chuck's eyes shifted back to the others. Calm. Calculated. 5, he said. For a split second, the others hesitated. Maybe they should have left. Maybe they could have walked away. But the man with the chain didn't think. He swung. Second worst mistake of his life. Chuck caught the chain midair, coiled it around his forearm, and yanked hard. The biker stumbled forward, completely off balance. Chuck drove a knee into his gut like a piston. The man lifted off the ground, wheezing, and dropped hard. The chain clattered from his hands. 4. Now it was panic. The brute, the one who shattered the mirror, charged like a bull. Big. Fast. Angry. But Chuck didn't move until the last second. Then he sidestepped, pivoted, and brought his elbow down like a hammer on the back of the biker's skull. The man dropped like dead weight. 3. The last 2 came at once, one with a crowbar, the other aiming low for Chuck's legs. Didn't matter. Chuck ducked the crowbar, caught the wrist, twisted. Another yelp. Then, flip, the biker sailed over Chuck's shoulder and slammed into the hood of a nearby motorcycle. The 6th man barely had time to blink before Chuck's fist sank into his gut. Then, an uppercut. Clean. Final. He hit the dirt hard. Silence. 6 men, down. Groaning. Clutching limbs. Stripped of every ounce of bravado. Chuck exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders, then turned to the one still standing. The leader. Pale now. Hands twitching, eyes wide. Thinking about the gun on his hip. Chuck tilted his head. Go ahead, he said. Try it. The man froze. Then slowly, his hand dropped away from the gun. Smart. Chuck nodded. 2 mistakes today, he said. First, you picked my truck. Second, you thought numbers mattered. The leader swallowed hard. Chuck stepped closer, his voice low and steady. Don't make a third. The man didn't move. Chuck turned and walked toward the truck. Behind him, the bikers scrambled, grabbing their wounded, trying to disappear. Chuck reached for the handle. And that's when he heard it. Boots. Fast. Close. He sighed. Didn't even turn. His elbow snapped back. Thwack. The leader collapsed before he even hit the ground. Chuck looked down. That, he said, was the 3rd mistake. He climbed into the truck, door groaning under his weight, and settled into the seat. Calm. Unbothered. Like none of it even touched him. He adjusted the rearview mirror, gave the lot one last glance. Bikers limping, scattering like the wind. Then he shifted into gear and pulled away. The dust hadn't even settled. Some of them were still groaning in the dirt. Others were trying to push themselves up on shaky limbs. And the leader, he was sprawled out, clutching his ribs, his breath coming in short, broken gasps. Chuck watched him without a flicker of emotion as the man struggled to roll onto his side. His face was twisted, half pain, half rage. Chuck turned the key. The truck's engine came to life with a deep, thunderous roar. A sound that filled the silence like the growl of something ancient, something dangerous awakened from rest. He reached for the gear shift, ready to leave this mess behind. Then, he stopped. A flicker in the side mirror. A shift in the air. One of them was moving. The leader. Chuck sighed. His fingers tensed slightly on the wheel, then relaxed. He knew the type. Too proud to take the loss. Too stubborn to stay down. There was always one. He stepped out of the truck. The leader was on his knees now, trying to stand. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth, dripping down over gritted teeth. He gasped, trembling, but still reaching. A slow, shaky hand moving toward something at his waist. Chuck's head tilted, watching. A knife. It caught the sun as it slid free from its sheath. His knuckles were white around the grip, jaw clenched, chest heaving. He wiped the blood from his mouth and forced himself to his feet, barely. His body swayed, but hate kept him upright. Hate and humiliation. His eyes locked onto Chuck. "This ain't over," he growled, voice thick with pain. Chuck stepped forward. Just one step. But that was enough. The space between them shrank. And the biker flinched. He tried to hide it. Failed. Chuck's voice came low and even. Solid. Heavy. Unshakable. "It is." The biker's breath hitched. But he still stood there, shaking, knife gripped tight. "You think you're some kind of legend?" the leader spat. "Some untouchable ghost?" Chuck didn't answer. "You're just a man," the leader snapped. One man. Against 6. Chuck took another step. And this time, the leader stumbled back. It wasn't pride that moved him, it was instinct. Fear. Chuck had seen that look before. That moment when arrogance finally meets the truth. And realizes it's already lost. "You still don't get it," Chuck said. The leader glared, eyes waiting, burning. Chuck's voice didn't change. "I wasn't fighting 6 men." A pause. "I was fighting 6 mistakes." The words hit harder than fists. And this time, everyone felt it. He nodded toward the others. And now, they know it. Silence. The wind picked up, scattering gravel across the pavement like nature itself was trying to reset the scene. The other bikers shifted, glancing away. None of them were laughing anymore. Chuck took another step. The leader's breath was uneven now. He held the knife tighter, but it didn't matter. "Drop it," Chuck said. The man hesitated. Chuck didn't. In a flash, faster than thought, he moved. 1 second the knife was up. The next, the wrist was bent in the wrong direction. Crack. The blade hit the pavement. The leader hit the dirt. Chuck stepped back, slow and deliberate. The leader clutched his wrist, trembling. His brain finally catching up to what his pride refused to see. Chuck looked down at him, voice unreadable. "Walk away." The man didn't move. Chuck leaned in slightly, and his voice dropped lower. "Or don't." The air went still. Then, slowly, painfully, the leader pushed himself to his feet. He glanced at his gang. None of them met his eyes. He turned. And he walked. Chuck stood still, watching. One by one, the others followed. Broken, limping, silent. No more words. No more threats. Just shame and the sound of engines coughing to life. The leader climbed onto his bike last, his body stiff, his head low. He didn't look back. And then, with one final roar, they were gone. Chuck exhaled, rolling his shoulders once, then turned and headed back toward the diner. Inside, the crowd had been watching, faces pressed to the glass, frozen in awe. Even Betty, the waitress, still stood behind the counter, gripping a half-filled pot of coffee like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Chuck stepped back inside. No one said a word. The hum of conversation hadn't returned. Not yet. The silence walked in with him. He returned to his booth, sat down, picked up his fork. His steak was cold. That was a shame. Betty approached slowly, like someone waking from a dream. Why you want me to heat that up?" she asked. Chuck looked up, calm as ever. "Nah," he said. Then he cut another bite and kept eating. Her voice was uncertain. Mr. Norris?" He looked up. "You want me to heat that up for you?" Chuck glanced down at his plate, then casually shook his head. "No need," he said, and took another bite. The silence inside the diner lingered like fog. Heavy. Unspoken. Untouched. Nobody dared speak. Not after what they'd just seen. 6 men taken down effortlessly, as if Chuck had been tying his shoes instead of dismantling a gang. Fork in hand, he finished the last of his steak, chewing slowly, undisturbed by the dozen eyes fixed on him from every corner of the room. Outside, the sound of motorcycles grew faint, fading into the horizon like a bad memory being erased by the desert wind. But inside, the air hadn't cleared. Betty still stood behind the counter, the coffee pot trembling in her grip. A few truckers exchanged slow, quiet glances. Not out of fear. Not entirely. But with the weary understanding of men who'd seen real violence before and knew exactly what they were looking at. Even the jukebox had gone silent, as if it, too, was paying its respects. Chuck took a sip of his iced tea, then set the glass down. He pushed the plate away. Cold steak wasn't ideal, but he'd had worse. Some things in life couldn't be helped. He adjusted the brim of his hat and stood. The sound of the chair legs scraping against the floor was the first noise the room had heard in minutes. And just like that, the tension snapped. Betty flinched, blinked, as if waking from a trance. Mr. Norris, she began. But she was cut off. Outside, the sharp whine of motorcycle engines split through the silence like a blade. Not fading away this time. Returning. Chuck didn't need to look. He sighed quietly, placed a few bills on the table, then turned toward the door. Out on the highway, the engines roared, louder, heavier. The bikers had come back. Betty's face drained of color. The truckers stiffened in their seats. And all that tension that had just begun to melt away? It came crashing back, heavier than before. Chuck, however, stayed calm. Boots tapping in a steady rhythm across the floor as he made his way to the door. This was always how it went. Some people only needed one lesson. Others needed 2. And then there were the fools. The ones too proud, too angry, or too stupid to know when they'd already lost. He pushed the door open. The desert heat surged inside. Hot. Dry. Unforgiving. Chuck stepped out onto the porch, eyes narrowing slightly. They hadn't just come back. They'd brought reinforcements. The same 6 men, bruised, battered. Now joined by at least a dozen more. Engines rumbled across the parking lot like distant thunder. Dust swirled around their boots. They sat astride their bikes like a makeshift army, faces hard, fists clenched, weapons visible. And in the center of them all, the leader. Still wearing that skull vest. Still nursing that twisted wrist. But now, his fear was gone. Replaced with something worse. Rage. "You should have walked away, old man," he snarled. Chuck tilted his head slightly, glancing across the row of riders. More bodies. More noise. More cleanup. He considered just getting in his truck. Leaving. Letting them stew in their own failure. But then he saw the way the leader's hand hovered near the gun on his hip. The way his jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot with humiliation. This wasn't ending with words. It never did. The leader raised his good hand and pointed straight at Chuck. "Get him." For one breath, the world held still. And then they came. The first biker charged, swinging a steel pipe at Chuck's head. Chuck sidestepped effortlessly, letting the weapon slice air. Before the man could recover, Chuck seized his wrist, twisted, and flipped him over his shoulder with a sharp, clean throw. The biker hit the pavement hard. Didn't get up. The second came fast, wild punch aimed at Chuck's ribs. Chuck caught the fist mid-swing, grip tightening like a vice. Then, knee to the gut. Elbow to the skull. Down. Next came two more, one with a chain, the other waving a rusted crowbar. Chuck didn't flinch. The chain cracked through the air. But he caught it, wrapped it around his forearm, and yanked. His attacker stumbled forward, helpless. And Chuck drove a fist into his chest, dropping him to the ground before turning to the one with the crowbar. That guy didn't even finish his swing. Chuck was already moving. The man stumbled forward, off balance. And Chuck greeted him with a kick to the chest so brutal, it sent him flying backward like a rag doll. The biker with the crowbar froze. Just for a split second. But it was enough. Chuck closed the distance. One clean strike to the throat. The man collapsed like a house of cards. Now the rest of the bikers hesitated. The confidence that once crackled like electricity was gone. Replaced by doubt. Fear. They exchanged glances. Some gripped their weapons tighter. Others loosened them slightly, unsure if holding on meant bravery or suicide. The gang leader, still straddling his bike, snarled. "What the hell are you waiting for? Take him down." 3 more charged. Chuck moved like a storm. Fast. Precise. Unrelenting. A bat swung at his head. He ducked and countered with a vicious palm strike to the attacker's chin. Another came in with a knife. Chuck twisted his wrist mid-swing, disarming him in a heartbeat. The third tried to bull rush him. Chuck caught his collar and hurled him sideways into a parked motorcycle. Metal crunched. Bodies dropped. That was enough. The rest froze. Some stepped back. Others looked to their leader for orders. But the leader had nothing left. Just disbelief and desperation. Chuck saw it before he moved. The twitch of the fingers. The decision forming in his eyes. He was reaching for his gun. Chuck struck first. One lightning-fast kick. The leader flew backward off his bike, slammed into the pavement. Hard. The gun never even left the holster. And then, silence. Chuck exhaled, rolling his shoulders like he was brushing off dust. Around him, chaos. Bikers groaning on the ground. Weapons scattered. Pride shattered. He looked down at the leader. "You made a 4th mistake," Chuck said calmly. The man wheezed, barely able to lift his head. "You came back." That was the final straw. The bikers who could still move scrambled for their motorcycles, dragging their fallen comrades or leaving them behind. Engines revved. Tires spun. And then they were gone. Just specks of dust against the desert sky. Chuck took one last look at the empty lot, then turned and walked back inside the diner. Stillness. He sat down, picked up his fork, and resumed eating his now cold steak. Outside, the last growl of a motorcycle faded. Inside, the weight of what had just happened still hung in the air. Betty stood frozen, rag in hand. Truckers whispered in hushed voices. Even the jukebox hesitated, its lights flickering nervously. Chuck? He just took another bite. A few bikers outside began to stir, bloodied, broken, barely able to move. The scarred one rose first. He locked eyes with Chuck through the window. Not with defiance. Not quite fear either. Just understanding. He turned to the others. Get up. One by one, they struggled to their feet. The leader, Travis, didn't speak at first. Didn't move. Until finally, in a whisper, "We leave." And just like that, they did. Some limped. Some were carried. None of them argued. Inside, Betty exhaled hard. Holy hell. Chuck finished his iced tea. A trucker spoke next. You think they're coming back? Chuck set the glass down. No. The trucker nodded. Didn't need more than that. Outside, Travis climbed onto his bike last. He looked back at Chuck. Started to say something. Then thought better of it. They rode off, fading into the sand. And they didn't look back. Betty finally let go of the rag. You really don't say much, do you? Chuck looked up. Shrugged. You don't need to, she added, half smiling. The jukebox crackled to life. Truckers returned to their meals. Voices grew louder. As stories began to form. Chuck's name would travel far from this diner. But he didn't stay to hear it. He paid his bill. Stepped outside. Assessed the damage. Scratched paint. Busted mirror. Slashed tires. Nothing he couldn't fix. Betty offered to call a tow. He declined. Pulled out a jack. Changed the tire himself, quick, efficient, calm. Didn't ask for help. Didn't need it. Once it was done, he wiped his hands, locked the compartment, and climbed into the driver's seat. The engine rumbled to life, strong. Steady. Betty watched him go. Next time you're around, she called out. Stakes on the house. Chuck gave her the faintest nod. Then rolled out. The black F-650, scarred and dusty, disappeared into the horizon. The road stretched out ahead. Endless. And Chuck didn't look back. Because for men like him, the road never ends. Like what you saw. Then don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more legendary stories. Share this video with a friend and let us know in the comments. Where do you want Chuck Norris to go next? The road is waiting. And so is he.